I gotta say, this album was pretty good. And something that I noticed about EarthGang that I hadn't before I listened to MIRRORLAND was the easy transition that I had going into their music. I feel like I was never introduced to them, that I was always listening to them, but that's just a testament to how easily I transitioned into becoming a fan of their work. There wasn't a feature that I heard from them. There wasn't a grand appearance that I feel like they had that got me into their work. It was just, when did I start listening to them and how did I get into it? EarthGang has a slew of EPs that they've dropped, a slew of mixtapes that they've come out with to get people introduced to their sound. They've been around for quite a while, but this is their first full-length debut on Dreamville. And yes, the Outkast, B.O.B., every other Southern rapper you can name comparison when it comes to EarthGang is pretty stale at this point. I do hear Outkast influence, and I do understand the whole duo thing, you having to compare them because they're from Atlanta and there are only two of them. One's a little bit more laid back and monotone, and the other one's a lot more animated and explosive. I understand that. But if you're gonna compare Johnny to Andre, I would at least throw in CeeLo in his Goody Mob days, especially given how much Johnny sings here. So the theme I got from listening to this album is one of reflection, clearly due to the name MIRRORLAND, and also because of this physical experience that they have in the real world, but this spiritual want or connection they have to this world that they're trying to build. Johnny opens up with his very first verse on the album telling you to put your head on the mat where your feet are supposed to go and your feet in the air where your head is supposed to be. Lines like everybody trapping, everybody hard, to insinuate this is a world unlike what you've been used to. Also referencing culture in Atlanta, referencing how for some reason the world outside of Atlanta feels like every artist from there has to be a trapper, has to be hard. The low-key accordion, the soulful piano keys, the creeping looming vocals in the background, like everyone else is staring, waiting for me to catch on to this high before I enter their domain. And I say that because the closing portion of this song is literally like an entrance into a completely different world. Women and men with feet and hands for faces instead of actual faces, talking cars, trees, animals that talk, 10 fingers on each hand. These are all things that I picture when the last 2 minutes of this track closes out, as it feels like I'm being dragged into another dimension by these two Willy Wonka-like characters. Filled with eccentricity and flamboyance, I feel like this is the start of The Wizard of Oz in 2019. The second track is easily my favorite on the album, and I didn't realize it came out 10 months ago, but it's like a demanding trap seance. Johnny is so animated here, going from rapping to singing, messing around with his vocal inflections, from going really low-key and howling, bitch, I'm up. This track seems to imply that Johnny and Dot have this desire to protect their world and their energy. When Johnny brings up, you're in my world now, I make the rules, and other lines from both of them pretty much telling you to check your circle before you enter, is almost like they require this baptism or cleansing of yourself spiritually and physically before you can enter this world that they've created. And that advice is also a note to themselves as they traverse through the physical world, trying not to bring that energy into their mental. Nightmares come true. This track is actually pretty creepy. Top Down is another track that similarly tackles this unbelievably nonchalant world where the two can do whatever it is that they want without worrying about the pitfalls of life. Dot isn't as expressive as Johnny is, but he does make up for it in my opinion with his writing. In his verse, he kind of details this almost lack of self-awareness that his lover at the time helped him acknowledge, that he was kind of moving in a very one-dimensional way, despite the fact that he was trying to build this world and build what he wanted to live and exist in. He may have unintentionally cornered himself into a very one-dimensional style of life, paying more attention to the goal and less attention to himself, and needing to have that attention to both equally if you're going to be happy at the end of that goal. And his voice floating atop these strings that lead into these perfect snares and 808s is just great. Dot does expound upon this subject even more on the track Blue Moon, kind of implying that every blue moon I'll take a break, every blue moon I'll check in on myself, every blue moon I'll have a fling and enjoy that on the way, on the path to success. I need to make sure that I'm still enjoying the life that I have here. I'm still on the fence on whether I love or kind of just like the track Proud of You with Young Thug. I do think they all do well enough, and the title is pretty self-explanatory given the subject matter. I guess the trap foundation on this track though just throws me off. I feel like it could just be more grand or more beautifully stated. I don't know if it's just me. The track this side is very minimalistic, but it's such an ambient intoxication. Johnny's entire verse, in my opinion, is an appeal to why the world that they're trying to build and the state that they're trying to live in is more preferable than the one that they're currently in right now. They discuss all the good on their side and also tell the bad of this side, talking about how on this side they took Nip, on this side they took X, but on their side they show love, on their side they have peace. The abrupt instrumental change and the pacing of this track is likely a nod to the other side of Atlanta. Really dirty, grimy, dangerous, really tart, very momentum driven track to illustrate the danger of the other side of Atlanta. I think Dot's distorted vocals and the heavy 808s here help to paint that picture even more. This is again discussed on tracks like Swivel, where they talk about their anxiety and their paranoia. Easily my second favorite track on this album has got to be Tequila. That is easily Latin jazz euphoria with these really grand, large horns in the background. It goes on about the traumas of life and the consequences of dealing with that trauma through alcohol. The T-Pain feature on this track is a little odd to me. Mainly because of the auto-tune, not necessarily that he wasn't mixed well, because the mixing on this album is beautiful. And his verse contributes to the overall theme of the song, but I don't necessarily feel like his voice fits this one shot for my pain, one shot for my sorrow, kind of rugged, kind of blues-like delivery that Dot and Johnny have.
Here lies a bunch of lies.
You gonna tell me that don't sound like CeeLo?
Kumbaya, kumbaya, yelling, running through the tunes, through the days, solo dolo, no delays. Who to say? Got my message in the glass, no delay.
This track still go hard though. Avenue is also a pretty psychedelic track that I could picture Freddie Gibbs rapping over. And look, there are so many things on this album that I think Johnny and Dot do well. Their devotion to their own aesthetic, despite being from an area that's so popular for a specific sound and a specific reason, is extremely admirable. It really does feel like they lived and sat with every nook and cranny of this album. It feels completely filled up with them. Even if there are songs here that I am not as big of a fan of, to say that any of the songs here don't have the same consistent amount of care, you'd be disingenuous. Despite that, there are some shortcomings. For instance, I don't like the fact that we don't keep the same theatrical vibe that we had in the beginning of the album and keep that momentum for the duration of the project. It does trickle down very noticeably near the latter half of it. And I don't mean just trickle down in terms of the production here. I mean trickle down in terms of the energy that the group gives. I actually think the features outside of T-Pain and Young Thug on this album are pretty weak, and we do get a long stretch of them. The features just never maintain or can keep up with the energy that I feel that the two, Johnny and Dot, give. Honestly, I think Mariba has the best fitting performance on this project and the least awkward, and she's hidden. Trippin is just such an awkward romance song to me, like a stripper at the strip club who can't dance. In this case, I guess the stripper will be Kehlani. She's easily got the weakest feature on this project. And though I don't mind the track Stuck or Feel with Arin Ray and Malik, I just don't think that they're memorable enough to take up so much of what they take up in the song. When it comes to memorable performances, Johnny easily outshines Dot, and I do think Dot's lack of contribution vocally sometimes can make him come off like A$AP Rocky. And tracks like Wings to close the album out are a reminder of how many hooks fill up certain songs and how large of gaps we get where the two of them aren't really adding too much to the song itself. And this only happens with the last 3 or 4 tracks. That being said, I do think my biggest issue with the project is just seeing their potential and then seeing them kind of trickle off near the end. This world that I think they could have created could have been a masterpiece, and I'm telling you that this could have been an instant classic, but I do think they kind of fall back into the traditions of what it's okay or acceptable to talk about in hip-hop music anyway. This magic that they pretty much created on the first track, I feel like they could have maintained for the rest of the album. That dimensional shift from the first track into the second, and then the instructional guide of you telling me I basically have to be baptized to sit in and enter your world is fantastic. But the dipping in of the real world and the dipping back out into this beautiful world that they've created musically is just, it just makes the project feel inconsistent. I want to live in Mirrorland, okay? I don't want to be in the real world. I want to live where y'all live. I do still think this is a pretty good project, as I said in the intro, and I'm still willing to slap a 7 out of 10 on the album because I really enjoyed it. But you let me know how you felt about it in the comment section down below. And I'm looking forward to their next work. I'm looking forward to the next stuff that they're going to put out. But I really did enjoy this. Like, from the bottom of my soul, I enjoyed this. Thank you for watching, and I'm out. Peace.